Good afternoon, Minister, guests, judges, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for the secondary division of the MOF Inter-School Budget Debate Finals is this House would distribute cash handouts to households to stimulate growth in the economy. Today, we have 8 debaters from 4 schools participating in our finals. I would like to ask the audience to please hold their applause until I have introduced the speakers from each side. On the proposition side, in proposition Team 1 on my right, we have Hwa Chong Institution represented by Lee Ka-hao and Glendon Goh. In proposition Team 2, we have Methodist Girls' School represented by Minerva Lim and Emrys Lee. A round of applause for the proposition. On the opposition side, in opposition Team 1, we have Nanyang Girls High School represented by Nettie Chu and Nicolette Tan. In opposition Team 2, we have Raffles Institution represented by Adil Hakim and Nicholas Kwa. A round of applause for the opposition. Today, teams are simulating a budget debate set in Singapore's parliament. Teams will debate a particular policy proposed by the Ministry of Finance, which is represented by the first proposition team. The other teams have also been assigned specific groups in society to represent, as they support or attack the policy from different angles. Now, let's move on to how the debates work. Each speaker has 5 minutes in which to make their case and attack the case of the opposing team. At 30 seconds, the bell will be rung once. It will be rung again at 4 minutes and 30 seconds. This signals the start and end of the zone in which opposing teams may offer the speaker points of information. At 5 minutes, the bell will be rung twice to signal the end of the speech. At 5 minutes and 30 seconds, the bell will be rung continuously. This signals that the speaker must stop speaking soon, as he has overshot his allocated time. Okay, that's it for the rules. Let's begin the debate. To start us out, I call Lee Ka-hao of Hwa Chong Institution to open the case for proposition Team 1.
The problem of the current economic crisis is a slump in global demand. Hence, our stance is that the government must tackle the issue of falling demand through the distribution of cash handouts to boost domestic demand, which in turn stimulates the economy. But first, some definitions for the House today. Cash handouts refer to the distribution of liquid assets such as grants and rebates to the citizens. All policy follows the measures that our Prime Minister has proposed in the budget, including some key features such as the 40% property tax rebate, doubling of GST credits, and personal income tax rebate. These measures will be a 2.6 billion cash injection into our economy, the same amount that's been spent on businesses. Secondly, we need to recognize that our economy is contracting. Thus, the purpose of stimulation is not to expand the economy, but rather to stabilize it and reverse the trend of contraction. This debate is about whether or not cash handouts have a role in stimulating the economy, and bearing in mind that cash handouts are complement other measures in the budget as well. My substantive is on how cash handouts stimulate domestic demand and how this stimulates our economy. So now let me start off by establishing the need for domestic demand. Every economy functions on supply and demand. However, during the recession, supply functions under suboptimal capacity due to plummeting demand.
Point, sir.
No, thank you, madam. Now, with external demand plummeting, as evidenced by Singapore's exports contracting by 21%, hence, there is a greater need to depend on domestic demand to maintain our economy. And indeed, this has been the case for Singapore, as we witness domestic demand contributing to 55% of our nation's gross domestic product in the third quarter of 2008. No, thank you, madam. Hence, we see it as stimulating domestic demand will stimulate our economy. Cash handouts will lead to greater domestic spending because of the following reasons. Firstly, cash handouts reach the whole population, and especially the middle class and lower income groups, due to progressive tax rebates. Now, because the middle class and the lower class have greater marginal propensity to spend on consumables which are locally produced, we see that this demand will stimulate growth in our economy. Moreover, ladies and gentlemen, we see that every household is entrenched in a pattern of spending based on a balance of income, needs, and established lifestyle. In a recession, people tend to cut down spending on normal goods. However, all households have an established and entrenched lifestyle tied to the socio-economic class in which they will require a certain level of spending to maintain. When given cash handouts and with greater disposable income, we see the households would be more inclined to return to normal spending. Because the lifestyle is so entrenched, even in recession, ladies and gentlemen, we say the lifestyle is hardly altered in times of a recession. No, thank you, sir. Furthermore, we see that cash handouts serve as a buffer against uncertainty in times of recession.
Sir.
Hold on a moment, ma'am. With greater disposable income, we see that people are more inclined to return to normal patterns of spending. Yes, madam.
As you say that their lifestyles will remain constant, then we question that all this government money that is going to these people, wouldn't they be likely to save it rather than spend it and stimulate growth in our economy?
Thank you, madam. Now we should put forth to you that people need this money. And it's during a time of recession where people are already cutting back on normal goods. Now, furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, I'll move on to show you why people have no incentive to spend it in my point of substantive. Secondly, another reason for people not spending is because in times of recession, interest rates are low. Thus, there's less incentive for people to spend their handouts. Thirdly, thank you, sir. When Singapore's savings rates are already one of the highest in the world, standing at 55%, we see the marginal utility of even higher savings diminishes. How so? It's a simple economic principle that beyond a certain point, money saved is an inefficient commodity. As such, it should be rather spent or invested, and therefore people would not want to save. Fourthly, we see that inflation is declining. In a recession, goods tend to be cheaper. As such, households will have more incentive to spend. Lastly, cash handouts affect the population directly and palpably, as compared to indirect measures that only aim at the corporate sector. When the people see that the government is acting decisively, they have more confidence to resume normal spending. This then helps to maintain demand for goods and services, which in turn helps businesses, saves jobs, and stimulates the economy. Now, this is evidence in the US stock market crash of the 70s when rebates were given to boost domestic spending. And these rebates fully matched the spending during this period. And as such, please go to the government.
Thank you, Kahal. I now call Nettie Chu of Nanyang Girls High School to begin the attack from the opposition.
It seems that our proposition today has actually forgotten about the importance of businesses, the importance of taxpayers in our society today. And ultimately, we tell you that because of the immense impact of businesses, because of the positive multiplier effect that businesses can bring about, because of the fact that they provide Singaporeans with job stability, we tell you that businesses will bring us through this economic crisis. So two main questions we have to ask ourselves. Firstly, are cash handouts feasible? And secondly, are cash handouts effective in the long term and the short term? So firstly, are cash handouts feasible in the first place? Now, according to what they said, according to them, Hwa Chong has stated that staggered cash handouts will be the way to go. Now, in this case, cash handouts will be given out by the government long term. And we ask them today, can the government afford this? Because ultimately, in the context of a recession, we have to understand that the government's budget is finite and that allocation to any sector must be carefully spent. Unfortunately, we question that 580 million has already been freed up for GST credits in the budget, as Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam has stated in his budget speech 09. Now we question that since this amount of money has to be given to households, not only in the short term, but as they stated, to every single household in Singapore, we question the sustainability of their policy in the first place. No, thank you, sir. So secondly, on the other question, on whether cash handouts are effective both in the long term and the short term. Now, firstly, we must understand that in the context of a recession, Families today are concerned about saving. No, thank you, sir. When we are giving cash handouts, the first instinct is not to spend it on staples, but more importantly, to save it in the bank. And this is the problem that cash handouts have in society today. As I'll be introducing later, in our case, where we instead advocate for more retraining programs, where we advocate for more GST credits in our GST cuts in our society today. In fact, what this brings about is that it actually encourages spending because it brings down the cost of spending for consumers, like for everyone in Singapore. Secondly, let's present to you an alternative today where we talk about GST cuts, how this actually manages to stimulate the economy as opposed to what they've proposed. No, thank you, sir. When we talk about GST cuts, what it does is that it alleviates the cost by taxpayers, thereby cutting costs for citizens and, more importantly, businesses aside. In the context of this recession, we cannot only consider this in a micro level, but we have to look at it on a macro level, where to bring us out of this recession, we have to focus on businesses, on engaging the regional economy. And to do this, we tell you that, more importantly, we have to lower GST rates. We have to encourage foreign investment into our society. And to do this, we tell you that ultimately GST cuts and retraining programs are the way to go. So then, allow me to move on to my main point for today on our counter policy first and foremost. No, thank you, sir. Firstly, what we advocate for is cuts in the GST. This amount will be determined by various authorities such as the Ministry of Finance, the MAS, MTI, as well as associated businesses and consumer associations, which will be reviewed on an annual basis. But more importantly, why this helps over them is because it provides immediate relief to consumer spending, then ensuring that Singaporeans actually have more disposable income, which actually achieves the same intended effect that our proposition has stated. Secondly, because of the fact that GST cuts actually in fact affect everyone, from households to businesses across the board, the lower income families now are targeted, and they now spend a lower proportion of the income after the cut for daily necessities. This allows them to spend money on alleviating their standard of living, allowing for an automatic stimulation of our economy, and this is what we are aiming for today. Together with the GST cuts, we'll be advocating for money being spent on cash handouts to top up current funding. No thank you, sir. For retraining programs such as the skills program for upgrading and resilience. Considering the potential loss of jobs in a recession, retraining programs such as ours allow employability for Singaporeans to ensure job stability, to ensure a stable income in the long run. As business and taxpayer representatives, ultimately, we feel the need to be empowered and to uphold the idea of meritocracy, as my second speaker will be continuing. No, thank you, madam. Unfortunately, today, as they have stated, distributing cash handouts defeats both purposes, simply because it is not effective, feasible, and sustainable in the long run, as ours continue to prove. So then now, allow me to continue on empowering businesses. Now, today, I'm sure all sides have a common goal, to stimulate the economy. Businesses contribute more to the economy than household consumption today. The MTI states that private consumption expenditure, the GDP ratio, has actually decreased to less than 40% in 2007. In fact, the lowest percentage of household consumption of GDP in the world. And let's compare this household consumption to businesses, where they actually constitute the largest share of the GDP, followed closely by many, according to the Singapore Department of Statistics. This further reinforces the need to channel money to businesses who can effectively optimize and manage these funds well, by providing Singaporeans today with a stable income, not in the short term, but also in the long term. We've seen how they've been empowered with money with the 4.5 billion jobs credit scheme and the 5.1 billion rescue package today. And ultimately, let's all acknowledge the importance of businesses in bringing us through this economic crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Nettie. Five minutes 30. 5 minutes 15.
Okay, so she will be announcing the timings for each speaker as well.